Hello, good evening. My name is Dr. Trudy Ufundu. Thank you and welcome to our clinic this evening. Today, we're going to look at the possibility of pregnancy happening when you meet with your partner during your monthly menstrual bleeding. It's pregnancy possible when you have sexual intercourse with your partner during your bleeding, during your regular monthly bleeding. That's what we're going to address this evening. The essence of this particular video today is to put you on a notice, depending on what you want to do. So there are principally two major categories of members in our group. There are some people that want to start their families by becoming pregnant. Then there are some people that want to avoid pregnancy either when they are not ready or they've completed their families. So if you're in the different categories, how you will leverage on today's knowledge will be different. The bigger question is, how does normal pregnancy happen? When do you have the biggest chance of achieving pregnancy? If everything is standard, if your fertility is good, if you don't have any challenges, if your partner doesn't have any challenges, when is the appropriate time in a cycle of a woman to become pregnant? When can she not become pregnant? Do we have a particular time in a cycle of a woman when if she engages in lovemaking, she will not become pregnant? That's what we're going to address. So please, once you join, let's know who you are, announce your name, your location, then give me a few minutes. I'm going to explain. After my explanation, you will have opportunity to ask your questions. Now, let's start with the normal. Then we can go to the abnormal. For a woman to become pregnant, there are two things that must happen. She must produce her eggs, and there must be availability of a sperm. Now, every woman is given what we call a menstrual cycle. Your cycle is approximately from day 21 to day 35. That's the normal, regular cycle for every woman. Majority of women in their reproductive phase of life, so reproductive phase of life is when you can have the ability to become pregnant. So that means when you will start ovulating. The moment you stop ovulating, it means you no longer have eggs. So pregnancy is no longer possible. But so long as you have eggs, even if it's just few remaining, and there is availability of sperm, you can become pregnant. So when a man ejaculates at the peak of sexual intercourse, it's going to go through the vagina, go through the cervix, get to the womb, then begin the upward journey to go to either of the tubes. When it gets to the tubes, it's expected that this woman would have released her egg through the process of ovulation. So if we have availability of the eggs in the tube and we have availability of the sperm in the tubes, pregnancy will happen. Now, when the pregnancy is done happening in the tubes, it will start coming down about 10 to 14 days to implant. Now, pregnancy will first of all develop in the tubes, but it will continue to grow for the 9 months in the womb, after which when you go into labor, you will become a mother. Now, here's the deal. Within your given cycle, remember the normal is 21 to 35 days. So long as you bleed every 21 days, so long as you bleed every up to 35 days, that's your normal. If you bleed every more than 35 days, it's abnormal. It's abnormally long. If you bleed every below 21 days, it's abnormally short. So the bigger question is, what happens when a woman meets with her partner during her regular confirmed bleeding? The normal duration of bleeding is 5 days. It's actually 2 days. The lower limit is 2 days. The upper limit is 7 days. So long as you're bleeding during your bleeding period for up to 2 days is normal. So long as you're not bleeding more than 7 days is normal. Now, the bigger question is, can pregnancy happen? Guess what? Yes. It's rare, but pregnancy can happen when a woman makes love with her partner during her bleeding. How can this happen? Conventionally, in a woman that has about 28-day cycle with 14 days being her ovulation, possibility of pregnancy happening during the bleeding is almost impossible. But some women have short cycle. So when you have short cycle, it simply means you might not observe those typical period of no possibility of pregnancy. Your body will be different. So a woman that has a short cycle, even when she's bleeding, can quickly ovulate just towards the ending part of the bleeding. For example, if a woman has a cycle of less than 21 days and we apply factor 14, what's going to happen is, assuming this lady bleeds for 6 days, or let's say for 5 days or 7 days, at the beginning of bleeding, possibility of pregnancy is almost impossible. But towards the ending of the bleeding, so about day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, if the partner meets her during her bleeding, possibility remains that the partner might deposit a very healthy quantity of sperm, which will still be inside the body of a woman, so that if the woman stops bleeding on day 6, on day 7, or day 5, that sperm that was deposited in the vagina can survive up to 5 days. So pregnancy can happen in some select women who have short cycle, who releases their eggs almost immediately after bleeding. Because of regular availability of live quality sperm in the vaginal canal, once you deposit sperm in the vaginal canal, that sperm can survive up to 5 days. It's actually what defines the fertility window, the fertile window. The fertile window is the period in a woman's menstrual cycle where she has the best potentials of becoming pregnant. Your fertile window will open 5 days before your ovulation and ends a day after ovulation. So the typical way a woman can get pregnant if she's making love with a partner during her bleeding, it's not because that woman ovulated during the bleeding. Ovulation is not possible during your bleeding. The reason why your bleeding is actually failure of pregnancy to happen. The body of a woman is structured in such a way that if everything happens according to God's plan, you are not supposed to bleed. A woman is supposed to be pregnant anytime the egg is released. If that egg is fertilized, bleeding will stop. But if the egg is not fertilized, the cover of your womb, which was getting ready to receive the pregnancy, will disintegrate. When the cover of your womb disintegrates, it will pass out from your body as your regular bleeding. The reason why you bleed is because of failure of pregnancy if you're in your reproductive phase of life. So conventionally, the only period in the cycle of a lady when production of egg is not possible is during bleeding. You don't ovulate during bleeding, but you can ovulate almost immediately after bleeding. And if we have availability of sperm, you can become pregnant. So there are so many women out there that will be so surprised that they prefer to make love during their bleeding and they actually became pregnant. So conventionally, a woman can become pregnant anytime in her cycle, depending on her own unique body makeup and body setup. So very important to understand this. Now, I know depending on your cultural orientation, the concept of lovemaking during bleeding might sound strange to some people, but there are preferences. There are certain things you don't like that some other people prefer that. And there are confirmed evidence-based cases of couples that actually became pregnant when they made love to their partner during their bleeding. So the answer is yes. It's rare, but it can happen, especially if you have a short cycle and if you practice PPP. Remember, the mantra in our group is regular love making every 48 hours. That means make love today, break tomorrow, continue the other day until you succeed. So the month of November is actually devoted to regular love making. So the answer is yes. Pregnancy can happen when you meet with your partner during bleeding, not because you are ovulating, but because you have a short cycle and there is production of egg, which is called ovulation, almost immediately after your bleeding. And once you have availability of quality sperm, you can become pregnant. That's my presentation. I'm going to quickly allow you to ask me questions. Please, if today is the first day attending my clinic, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Remember to notify us by clicking on that subscription button so that subsequent videos and subsequent clinics you can attend completely free of charge. Immediately after this clinic, I'm going to run a repeat clinic in Facebook. So if you're in our Facebook page, our group, and if you're my personal friend in Facebook, you can also join us. But right now, please, your questions are welcomed. So start asking your questions quickly. Let's knock this off so we can go and get some rest. So feel free and ask me questions related to this topic. Start asking your questions, please, quickly. Remember to continue your challenge for the month of November, pretty much everyday love making. If you want to make babies, make love regularly. Some days you won't feel like it. Some days you're down. Some days you're depressed. Some days you're not just yourself. Those are the days you should actually show up. The days you feel like nothing is going to happen is actually the days things will happen. So it's not over until it's over. So pick yourself up. There are certain things that nobody can do for you, one of which is making love. So I know, especially if you're getting older, the possibility of wanting to make love will pretty much disappear because of so many stressors, and of which if you're getting older, your libido is going to be reduced, and infertility can cause a lot of stress in your relationship. So the fact you want to have a baby and you're not having baby can introduce a lot of anxiety. Anxiety is anti-love making. It can introduce a lot of insomnia. Insomnia is anti-love making. It can increase the level of your stress. When you're stressing a lot, it's anti-love making. So be careful. Let's just deal with the fact that you don't have a baby. And especially in this hard economy, if you don't have enough resources to seek fertility help, the only natural way for you to succeed is to use what God gave you already. Fortunately, you don't pay to make love. You just make love because that's what God gave you. And that's the natural way you can become pregnant. Okay. Is it possible to have short cycle and still not be ovulating? Yes. So women that have a regular predictive cycle of 28, 21, and they might think, oh, I'm okay, might not be okay. So whether you're 21, whether you're 35, whether you're long, whether you're short, possibility you might not be ovulating is there. Now, a couple of things. The reason why you might not be ovulating might be because you no longer have eggs. It might be because you got the eggs, but for some reasons, the eggs are not being released. So in that situation, we give you ovulation induction drugs. So once we confirm that you still got eggs, so how can we do this? There are some tests we can run to check the quantity of the eggs. So it's called ovarian reserve test. A typical way of checking your ovarian reserve test is to run a test we call anti-Mullerian hormone test, which is a blood test. We use it to check your reserve. So your reserve is the likely quantity of eggs you have remaining. We can also use a special ultrasound to go to the ovaries and look at the antral counting and see the likely number of eggs you have. But this is the deal. Once you're a woman and you start bleeding and you start ovulating, unfortunately, when you release your eggs, you don't replenish them. So age is the biggest contributing factor to ability of a woman to become pregnant. The best time to have all your babies, the best time to start your family is in your mid-20s. As you're getting older, the quantity and the quality of the eggs will decline by default, up to the point that when you get to age 37, there will be a sharp decline. It doesn't mean you don't have. You still have, but they are depleted. So the key word is, what do you do when you have fewer eggs? For example, there are some women that might only have 12 eggs in 2024. The question is, when you start your January and you know you only have 1 day to become pregnant in January, you know you only have 1 day to become pregnant in February, what are you going to do differently? Are you still going to be practicing what you think you're doing that is right? So the question I'm going to ask you is this: what are you going to do differently? Now, another question is, how do you know if you're ovulating or not? So it's not a magic. It's not a trial and error thing. You meet a fertility specialist. We run some tests. So the fact you're having your increase in cervical mucus, you notice an increase in your basal body temperature, doesn't confirm you are ovulating. There are some standard tests we use to check to see if you are ovulating. If you are ovulating, then we'll know we have to focus on other things. If you are not ovulating and we suspect you still got eggs, we can induce ovulation. But if it's confirmed you've gone into menopause or you've gone into a couple of other problems, we correct that problems. But if it's confirmed you no longer have eggs, then you have to go for donor eggs. The same thing is applicable to the men. Fortunately, men can improve the quality and the quantity of their sperm by simply modifying their lifestyle. The reason is because every 3 months, men will produce a fresh batch of new sperm. So if you have a poor lifestyle by November 2023, but from December you start living healthy, it's expected that around March of 2024, there will be a new production of sperm based on the quality of life you live. So you can improve your fertility by improving your lifestyle. Okay? I love that question. So we still have a few more minutes. COO, if you still have questions, feel free and ask. If not, we can dismiss and face our Facebook clinic. So I love that question. That's a very straightforward, simple explanation to that. So yes, you can have a short cycle and you're not ovulating. You can have a long cycle and you're not ovulating. You can have a regular cycle and you're not ovulating. Now, this is also something you need to be mindful of. The fact you're bleeding doesn't confirm you are ovulating. And the fact you're not bleeding doesn't mean you can ovulate. Some women might not bleed, but they are ovulating. Some women might be bleeding regularly, but they are not ovulating. So we don't focus on just bleeding. So if you want to start your family, whether you're bleeding or not, we don't really care about that because you might not be bleeding, but you have ovulated. And what's going to get you pregnant is the egg. So we encourage you to make love any which way you show up, any which challenge you have. Always make it a point of duty to create that time to make love. The tiebreaker in starting your family, CO, please catch this phrase for me. The tiebreaker in starting your family, the difference, the key that will unlock your kids, your generation next is actually love making. That's the difference. That's the big magic. Making love regularly. One more time might do the magic. You can start your family today. You can start your family tonight if you take the next step. So don't look at the things that happen on the physical. There are certain things happening on the inside, especially if you're older. The ability to have multiple pregnancy increases as you get older. So in as much as you might have fewer eggs, those fewer eggs can double, or you can produce more than one, and you can have more than 2 sperm, and you can have multiple pregnancy. So an elderly or advanced maternal age lady can easily have multiple pregnancy compared to a younger woman in her 25s. Correct. The tiebreaker in starting your family is making love regularly. That's a proven, evidence-based, factual method of starting your family today. Thank you for coming. At this juncture, I'm going to end the clinic. Thank you so much. My next clinic will be on Saturday. So join me on Saturday and we continue the conversation. In the meantime, join me in Facebook and we continue the conversation. CO, thank you so much. I'll see you guys in Facebook. Bye-bye for now. God bless.